I would like to introduce you to Lulu. She has made cameo appearances in other episodes, and as you can see, she's a little reluctant for today. She is 17 years old, and her trip to the vet last night for her first urgent age-related illness is the inspiration for today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about bereavement, grief, and pets. I'm Rachael Keefe, and this is Monday's Muse. Let me tell you a little bit about Lulu. She was a kitten rescue from the Big Dig in Boston, and she spent the first 10 years of her life living with my wife's Graham as a companion cat. Much of that time was spent in a sort of one-room assisted living. And Lulu really was Graham's cat. Lulu had no use for really any other human other than Graham. And while Graham was dying, she made sure that both my wife and I agreed to take in Lulu. And of course we did this. So 7 years ago, we brought Lulu home to our house, and she adjusted, and she became the sweet cat that she was with Graham, with both my wife and I most of the time. So last night, when we realized that she was sick and had to take her to the vet at midnight, both my wife and I are experiencing these intense feelings of grief and loss. And the reason for that is that this new grief, this new potential loss of Lulu touches other losses. For my wife, it's clearly deeply connected to the loss of her Graham, because Lulu's the last living connection to Graham. For me, it's a connection to my mother, who loved her cats and her dogs often more than the people in her life. It's not abnormal or unusual for someone to grieve perhaps more for a pet than for a person. And it isn't necessarily that the pet has more value. It's partly because the relationship with the pet is less complicated, and partly because of how grief is. I often describe grief as like being beads on a string. There's one, and then there's two, and then all of a sudden you have this whole necklace, and you can't take it apart. You can't separate them. When we lose a pet or face the possibility of losing a pet, it opens those vulnerable places where grief lives within us. Those places of loss of other people, other things, all the other losses that you experience in life are touched with a new loss. I really just want people to know that there's no wrong way to grieve, whether it's for a person or a pet or a job or ability or a home. Whatever it is you're grieving for, there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's no time limit on it. And when we experience those overwhelming feelings of grief, all we can do is continue to breathe through them and know that they will diminish a little bit over time until a new grief comes. And then it opens up and it's overwhelming again. I would like to dedicate this episode to Erica's Graham, Eleanor Morgan, and to Lulu. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.